Thank you for watching this short subject, the truth about the cloud and security. Now, before we get started, I think it's important to just add a disclaimer that a lot of the points I'm going to be bringing up may be controversial, and you may disagree with them, and that's okay. But the purpose of this is simply to get you thinking and to start a conversation. So let's get started. The first point I want to convey is that there is no cloud. Now, back when computer systems began, they started as giant mainframes that were only accessible via terminals that lived in the same room as those mainframes or were very nearby. And with the advent of networking, it became possible to separate the terminals from the mainframes, allowing more people to access them, but also to create discrete areas of access so that people could have more roles and responsibilities while sitting at their mainframe terminals at the same time. But that's not the only thing that happened. As computer processing and manufacturing became more elegant and more refined, it became possible to come out with higher and higher horsepower systems in smaller and smaller footprints, as in the servers. And servers started to take on a very unique role. Aside from doing compute functions and storage functions like mainframe, they also started to become massive information repositories. And a lot of companies use those servers mainly for repositories today because a lot of the actual processing work can now be offloaded to the endpoint. Another big innovation. When terminals first existed, they didn't have the horsepower to actually do data processing. It was really just data entry and data access. But with all of the available horsepower and small manufacturing processes that exist, you can put quite a bit of capability into a very small device that people can take with them. So as data centers and servers and mainframes started to take on a bigger and bigger role as data warehouses, and more of the actual manipulation and creation of the data started to exist on the endpoint, and networks continued to evolve, it became possible for people to take the information and move anywhere they wanted to with it around the world and still access what they needed to access to do their jobs. And that caused a lot of businesses to think, we're paying for a lot of electricity in these massive data centers, and we don't have people that are even on our own network anymore. They're off in the ether accessing information remotely. So do we really need to be paying for all of these operationally expensive rooms to just house racks and racks of servers and all of the cooling and electricity that goes with it? And the answer was no. So a lot of them started packing their stuff up and moving out. And before you knew it, we had the cloud. But did we? So what is the cloud? Now, I would argue that the cloud is nothing more than a way for organizations to classify or categorize the location of data and apps. It's not an architecture. It's just a way for compliance and risk and legal to segregate the roles and responsibilities of people as it relates to handling information. That's all it is. Now, before people get really, really frustrated at me and think that I'm completely off base and turn off this entire program, let me just clarify something. I'm not talking about the brick and mortar. I'm talking about the architecture. The architecture of a cloud deployment is the same as the architecture of an on-prem. You have massive data repositories front-ended by applications accessed by endpoints and systems. That's it. Now, of course, when it comes to building, yes, there is a distinction because you have systems and servers that you either have to maintain or decommission, derack, pack up, move somewhere else, ship disks off to another provider, load them up. There is definitely a physical labor-intensive process involved in the move. But once it's there, architecturally speaking, and from the end user customer's standpoint, it doesn't matter that you've moved to the cloud. It is completely transparent. And that's the point I'm getting at. If you have your data sitting in a data center that you have purchased, or you have your data sitting in a facility that somebody else owns and you're simply leasing some rack space or some virtual resources, it is functionally equivalent. There is no cloud. Now, of course, everything has to work together really, really well in order to make that model happen. And in most cases it does, but not always. And sometimes it's because people try and segregate in their own minds the cloud from everything else. So let's start with the first element. There is no cloud. Now let's look at part 2. There is no third party. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, third party is just a really fancy legal term of saying not me. But the reason why that's not relevant, especially as it comes to protecting your assets, is this example. Let's say you have a manual wind watch and something fails inside that watch. Let's say it's a bearing or a bushing. Now, what if every component inside that watch had their own persona, and when something stopped working, they all came out and got very grumpy at everybody else and started blaming everybody else for why something doesn't work, and it's your fault, I'm working fine, it couldn't possibly be me, it's got to be you, no, it's not me, it's got to be somebody else. Well, here's the problem with that. When you get into that mode, you've already missed the point. The point is that somebody's wearing a watch. And that person bought that watch so that they could tell the time. So to that person, they really don't care what happened under the covers. What they care about is this. The watch is broken. How much does it cost and how long is it going to take to fix it? And how much damage has been done? Did I miss a call? Did I miss a meeting? Did I miss a birthday? Did I miss a vacation? When did my watch stop working? How long have I been trusting this to be telling time and it has failed me? That's what they care about. And they're mad at the person that sold them the watch. They're not mad at the person that made the sprocket inside the watch that turns the gear that winds it. They're mad at the person that sold the watch. So it's not about the components. It's not even about the watch itself. It's about the individual or the business that sold the watch. So we all have to take a deep look in the mirror when we offer these services and be very aware that we are all directly liable for the success or failure of our end user customers. So third-party risk doesn't help because all that does is it allows us to contractually blame somebody else for a failure. It doesn't matter to the end user customer. So it behooves all of the organizations in the world to accept that duty and accept that accountability that they own the failure. Doesn't matter what it is. Now, the problem is most contracts aren't written like that today. They're written as things like service level agreements that says you will provide this service, and if this service is out, then after a certain amount of minutes or hours or seconds, you owe us financial remuneration for the damage incurred by the service not being there. The problem is we should be looking at damage level agreements. Damage level agreements would be a way for us to impose pain on our partners that fail us. That the partners need to have skin in the game and take direct accountability for success or failure of whatever it is we're providing and own it together. So it really isn't about third party or third party risk. It is just about risk, and there is no third party. Now, the final piece of this is looking at purely security. Security is not a container. So let's say we accept the fact that there is no cloud and there is no third party. You can take this concept that everybody talks about of people, process, and technology and say, yeah, this is great. Now, if there's a cloud and a third party, then we can focus on people, process, technology because it's just our organization. The problem is there is no cloud and there is no third party. The information is everywhere. And you can't dictate people, process, technology for everyone. You have to let them figure it out for themselves, but you need to create the rules that allow them to build people, process, technology in a way that suits your rules but fits their model. So instead of worrying about this, let's refocus ourselves. And in order to refocus ourselves, here's a riddle. What is it that you're trusted to hold, that you're out of business if you can't see, and that the bad guys want to steal? Well, the answer is information. So let's look at the information instead of the models. Now, information has two critical attributes. Number one, it can be accessed. And it's really accessed by three different groups. Clients, who bring you the information, employees who accept it from the clients and work on it, and the operations teams that are responsible for making sure that everywhere that information flows is working well and protected. These are three discrete roles. Now, this is one piece of it. The second piece of this is what you can do with that information. You can bring it in, you can send it out. You have core applications and core algorithms and core actuarial functions that operate on that input and output data. And it uses reference data sets to do it. So in an insurance example, reference data of 10 or 15 years of back policies and premiums and claims would be fed into a core function that would determine what the policies and pricing would look like for all the consumers that would then pay for it and sign up for those policies. So if you are monitoring all of the data in terms of how it's accessed and what people are doing with it, you can start to build a better security model, because when you connect those two pieces of information together, you will get two critical pieces of information: how things are failing, if they're failing, and when things are failing, if they're failing. So when something starts to go wrong, the minute that glass breaks in your environment, the minute you see something wrong, something else happens. A timer begins. And especially if you're GDPR compliant, you have exactly 72 hours from when you hear that glass break to when you have to do a public disclosure of as much information as you have. And so your goal should be to have as much information as you can gather in that 72 hours. Well, you can't do it with just how and when. There's still a giant missing piece, and that missing piece is you don't know who's at the epicenter. So if you want to really target the person or people behind whatever is breaking your glass, you need to put a lot of different pieces together really quickly. And the best way to do that is to have a really highly skilled, qualified security operations center staffed with threat hunters and threat intelligence experts who can look at the data and how it is being used, the data and how it is being accessed, the data warehouses in your environment, the global threat landscape and global threat data, and information and intelligence from federal sources and state and local sources. When you put all that together, you can now figure out who and why. But it only works if you're viewing it holistically. So let's go back to our two statements. There is no cloud and there is no third party. Now, imagine taking this model of pulling all these data sets together and figuring out who, and looking at the data access models and the data activity models across your entire environment, wherever that information lives. That's a pretty daunting task. But you have to do it, and you have to do it because the information is the information and it doesn't matter where it lives. So what you need to do is work with consultants and industry experts and outside counsel and inside counsel and your own risk and compliance people and your IT operations people and your security people. And you need to come up with a game plan and a set of legal agreements and contracts that bind people so that third parties just become parties, that everybody functions and acts like part of your organization and has equal skin in the game and shares the risk of brand damage if something goes wrong. And that's why fundamentally I say there is no cloud and there is no third party. So it's important to just wrap up with a couple of things. The reason why I'm saying this, the reason why I'm giving you this message is not meant for you, the organizations. This is meant for your clients. This is meant for the end user customers to think about and understand. Because it is possible to have a secure cloud environment, but you have to have the right mindset. And I believe a lot of organizations, frankly, still just don't get it. They are still trying to isolate themselves with contracts so that they can function in a silo and hold others accountable if there's a failure, without understanding the brand level impact of a failure, regardless of where it happened inside the chain. So because of that, contracts, SLAs, and audits offer no protection in the court of public opinion. If somebody is wronged and they tweet about it or post on Facebook about it, you are in a lot of trouble. And that's not something you can easily fix. And finally, as a result of those two things, many are still doing security wrong. It is possible to do it right, especially in a cloud environment with lots of other parties involved in touching your information, but you have to envelop it all and not be so focused on a people, process, technology framework, but look at it in absolute values. Here's the information, here's how it's accessed, here's how it's used. How do we protect that as a use case across my entire traverse where that information happens to go? And so, as a closing statement, I will offer this, that really the only way to safely and securely move to the cloud is to adopt the philosophy that there simply is no cloud. Thank you for your time.